Snow fell like ash from a dying sky. The wind screamed through the pines, bending old trees like they were saplings. Frost clung to the bark in thick, spidery veins, and the mountain trail had long since disappeared beneath a white veil. Most wolves had already taken shelter, holed up with their families, their packs, or warm within the great timber halls of the valley clans. But Mira had no such place. No hearth but her own, no pack but the wind. She was the Omega, always had been. Born small and weak, her wolf barely surfaced until she was 16, an age far too late by her pack standards. Most pups shifted by 10. The delay had marked her as something less. And in a world of power and rank, less meant nothing. Her parents were gone, killed in the southern raids when she was a child. With no one left to defend her, Mira had grown up on the fringes. Not hated, not abused, just invisible. She'd learned to live quietly, learned to expect nothing. And over the years, she'd carved out a life of sorts, a small cottage deep in the shoulder of Frostfall Ridge, where she gathered herbs, tanned hides, and kept the fire burning through winters that could freeze blood in minutes. It was on one such day, when the storm had rolled in hard and sudden, that she first heard the howl. At first, she thought it was the wind, a low, ragged sound, carried from the heights like a cry torn in half. But then it came again, louder, desperate. Mira froze with her hands in a bundle of pine boughs. The storm howled louder than any living thing. But this was real. Someone or something was out there. She hesitated. Her wolf stirred in her chest, uneasy. Not afraid, but alert. Every instinct screamed to turn back, to return to her hearth and seal the door shut. But something pulled her forward, a thread of tension in the air, a feeling in her gut she couldn't ignore. So she went. Through knee-deep snow and screaming wind, Mira climbed toward the higher ridges. Her boots slipped on the ice-slicked rock, her cloak heavy with snow. Her face burned from the cold, and still she pressed on, guided by the howls that grew fainter and more broken with each step. When she found them, she stopped breathing. Wolves. Not just one or two, but a whole pack. They were collapsed in the shallow glade, half buried in snow. Their flanks rose and fell weakly, some barely moving at all. Blood dotted the snow around them, dark against the white. Some had broken limbs, deep gashes, frostbite already setting on ears and paws. 33 of them. She counted, and none were hers. These weren't from her valley. Their markings were different. Coarser coats, scarred muzzles, strange symbols branded into some of their flanks. War wolves, maybe rogues, refugees. Mira didn't know. What she did know was that they were dying. She shifted without thinking, her bones breaking, skin stretching as her wolf surged forward. Pale gray and small, barely larger than a pup, her wolf form wasn't intimidating, but it was fast. One by one, she dragged the wolves, some larger than she was, down the mountain trail, back toward her cabin. It took hours. Her limbs burned. Her lungs felt like they'd crack. More than once she slipped and tumbled, taking the unconscious wolves with her down a drift, but she kept going, again and again, until all 33 lay curled inside her cramped one-room home, packed like sardines beneath every fur and blanket she owned. Her floor was soaked in blood and melted snow. Her food stores would barely last a week. And yet she didn't stop. She built a fire higher, mixed herbs for fever and infection, forced broth between cracked lips. She bound wounds with trembling fingers and murmured to them softly, voice hoarse from the cold. "You're safe now," she whispered, brushing snow from one thick ruff. "You're going to be okay." And when she was done, she collapsed beside the hearth, eyes burning, heart still racing with adrenaline and fear. Only then did she notice him, the largest of them all, black-furred and still as death, curled in the darkest corner. His chest barely moved, and deep claw marks marred his side. There was a strange aura about him, something heavy, ancient, and electric. Her wolf whimpered, just looking at him. She crawled toward him slowly, not wanting to startle him, but he didn't stir, not even when she touched his fur and felt the unnatural heat of fever boiling under his skin. He was dying faster than the others. She could feel it. Myra's jaw tightened. No, I didn't bring you all here just to let you go now. She worked through the night, mixing salves, massaging warmth into his limbs, whispering prayers to the moon goddess that she hadn't believed in since she was a girl. And in the deepest hour of the night, just before dawn, when her hands were raw and her breath fogged in the cold air, the black wolf stirred, only for a moment, a twitch of his ear, a low, rumbling growl deep in his throat, and then his eyes opened, not the dull, golden brown of common wolves, not the flicker of the sick or the weak, but ice blue, sharp as a blade. Mira gasped and took a step back. The wolf looked at her, really looked, and something in his gaze locked onto her, like a brand. It only lasted a second, but that second would change everything. Because unknown to Mira, the wolf she had saved, wounded and stripped of his title, power, and army, was Fenric, the exiled alpha king of the north, and she had just bound herself to him with a debt no king could ever forget. Mira did not sleep. She dozed in fragments, head nodding forward, fingers loosening around an empty cup, only to jerk awake at the slightest sound. The storm still raged outside, clawing at the cottage walls like a living thing, but inside there was a different kind of danger now. 33 wolves breed beneath her roof. The cottage was too small for this many bodies. Heat rolled through the air, thick with the scent of wet fur, blood, and pine smoke. Wolves lay shoulder to shoulder across the floor. Some curled protectively around others. A few whimpered in their sleep, paws twitching as if still running from something unseen. Mira moved carefully between them, stepping over tails and limbs, checking bandages, refreshing water bowls. Every sound felt too loud. Every breath felt watched. They were awake now, not fully but aware. Amber and gold eyes tracked her movements. Not hostile, not friendly either. Assessing. Pack wolves. She kept her gaze lowered, posture calm. Submission without fear. She had learned that balance long ago. One wolf, broad-shouldered with a scar splitting his muzzle, lifted his head when she knelt nearby. His lips twitched, teeth flashing briefly. A warning. Mira stilled instantly. "It's all right," she whispered, voice steady though her heart hammered. "I won't hurt you." The wolf stared at her for a long moment, then slowly laid his head back down. Only then did she release the breath she'd been holding. But he hadn't moved. The black wolf lay where she had left him, massive body stretched along the wall, shadows clinging to his fur as though they belonged there. His breathing was deeper now, less ragged, but the fever still burned beneath his skin. She crouched beside him again, dipping a cloth into cool water. When she brushed it along his neck, his muscles shifted under her hand. Strong. Even now, too strong to be an ordinary wolf. Her wolf stirred uneasily, pressing close to the surface of her skin. Careful, it warned. "I am," Mira murmured, though she wasn't sure to whom she spoke. The black wolf's eyes snapped open. This time, he did not fade back into unconsciousness. Ice blue eyes fixed on her, sharp and clear despite the fever. They flicked briefly to the room, taking in the wolves, the fire, the walls, then locked back onto her face. Awake. Fully. Mira froze. Slowly, carefully, she lifted her hands and leaned back on her heels. "You're safe," she said, the words coming out on instinct. "You're in my home." "I won't." A low growl rolled from his chest. Not a threat, a question. The other wolves stirred at the sound, lifting their heads, ears angling toward him. The room shifted subtly, the air thickening with awareness, with attention funneling toward the black wolf like gravity. He was the center of them. Mira swallowed. "You were caught in the storm," she continued. "You and the others. I brought you here so you wouldn't freeze." The wolf studied her like she was something unfamiliar and potentially dangerous. His gaze dropped to her hands, scarred, red from cold and work, then to the bandages wrapped tightly around his side. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition. He tried to rise. Pain hit him instantly. His body tensed, a sharp snarl tearing from his throat as he collapsed back down, claws scraping against the floor. "Don't!" Mira moved without thinking, pressing her hands to his shoulder and chest. "You'll tear the wound open." The contact jolted through her like lightning. The wolf went still, not rigid, not angry. Still, she realized too late that she was touching him far too familiarly. A stranger, a dominant wolf, possibly an alpha. Her heart raced as she drew back, but his gaze followed her hands, lingering where she touched him as if trying to memorize the sensation. Then, before she could process what was happening, his form began to change. Bones shifted with a sickening crack. Fur receded like shadows fleeing firelight. The wolf's body stretched, reshaped, reformed, until where the beast had been now knelt a man, one hand braced against the floor, breath harsh with pain. Mira stumbled backward and nearly fell. She had seen shifting before, of course. She was a werewolf herself, but never like this. The man was enormous, even kneeling, broad shoulders corded with muscle, skin marked with old scars, deep, deliberate ones that spoke of battle survived rather than avoided. His dark hair fell loose around his face, threaded faintly with silver, and when he looked up at her, those same ice-blue eyes burned with sharp intelligence. Not feral, regal. He took in the room again, slower this time, jaw tightening as he noticed the state of his pack. His gaze softened just barely as it passed over them. Then he looked back at Mira. "You should not have done this," he said. His voice was deep, roughened by pain and exhaustion. Not unkind, not gentle either. Mira straightened, chin lifting despite herself. "They would have died." He watched her carefully. "They are not your responsibility." "No," she agreed quietly. "But they were still alive." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then unexpectedly, he bowed his head. It wasn't deep. It wasn't ceremonial. But it was unmistakable. "You saved us," he said. "All of us." Myra's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say to that, so she defaulted to practicality. "You shouldn't have shifted yet. Your injuries. I've survived worse." She met his gaze, unimpressed. "Not today, you haven't." Something like amusement flickered across his face. "You speak boldly for an Omega," he said. The word landed heavier than she expected. Her shoulders stiffened. "You noticed." "I noticed many things." She resisted the urge to bristle. "Then you'll also notice that if you reopen those wounds, I won't waste herbs patching you up again." A corner of his mouth twitched. "Fair enough," he conceded. "What is your name?" "Mira." He repeated it slowly, as if tasting it. "I am Fenric." The wolves stirred at the sound of his name. Several lowered their heads. Others pressed their muzzles to the floor. Mira noticed. Fenric noticed her noticing. Their gazes locked. Understanding sparked, but did not yet ignite. "Your pack honors you," she said carefully. "They are loyal," he replied, not denying it. Silence stretched between them, thick with questions neither of them asked. Outside, the blizzard screamed. Inside, the fire crackled. And Mira, Omega, outcast, healer, had no idea that she was kneeling in front of a king who had just woken her home, or that from the moment he had opened his eyes, Fenric already knew one impossible truth. The storm had not brought him here by accident. The blizzard didn't let up. By the third day, the world outside Myra's cottage had turned into a solid wall of white. Trees bent under the weight of snow, and no sound came from the woods anymore, not even the crows. Everything was muffled, smothered, waiting. Inside, however, life stirred. The 33 wolves, once half dead and scattered across the floor, had begun to rise. Slowly, cautiously, some shifted into human form to stretch their limbs or speak in hushed tones. Others remained wolves, their recovery still fragile. They were a motley crew, different sizes, different markings, some with tattoos or burn scars along their skin. Soldiers, Mira realized, not ordinary pack wolves. These were warriors, and they all deferred to Fenric. He rarely spoke, but when he did, they listened. They followed his gaze, shifted when he shifted, reacted when he so much as cleared his throat. He hadn't needed to declare his title. His presence did it for him. And yet, he hadn't told her who he truly was. Fenric had remained in the corner closest to the fire, his back often to the others, but his attention never strayed far from Mira. Even when she wasn't looking, she felt the weight of his gaze. Not invasive, not threatening, just observing, calculating, and something else, too. Something that made her breath catch every time she turned and found his eyes already on her. It was on the fourth night, when the storm finally began to weaken, that she found him outside. Mira had stepped out to check the snowdrifts blocking the front door, expecting silence. Instead, she heard the crunch of footsteps and followed them around the side of the cottage. There, beneath the stars, blurry and faint behind lingering clouds, stood Fenric in his human form, shirtless despite the cold, staring into the dark line of the forest. His breath misted in the air. Fresh bandages wrapped his torso, white against the dark lines of his tattoos and scars. Snow clung to his hair, and his skin glowed faintly in the moonlight. "You're going to freeze," she said, her voice softer than she meant it to be. "I like the cold," he replied without turning. "You're still healing." "I heal fast." She stepped up beside him. "You're not as invincible as you think, you know. I never said I was." She tilted her head toward him. "You act like it." He glanced down at her then, the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You act like you're not afraid of me." Mira folded her arms. "Should I be?" "That depends." His gaze sharpened. "Do you know who I am yet?" The question caught her off guard. "I know you're their leader," she said carefully. "I know they follow you like a pack follows an alpha." "You think I'm just an alpha?" "I think you're dangerous," she said, voice steady, "and used to being obeyed. But if you want to say, I know you, I don't." Fenric didn't speak for a moment. Then, "Good." She blinked. "Good." He turned back to the woods. "It's easier that way." Mira studied him in the silence that followed. His shoulders were tense, like they were holding the weight of something heavy. Not physical. Something deeper. She recognized the posture. It was the stance of someone who was always on the edge of fight or flight. "Why were you out there?" she asked after a pause. "When I found you all in the snow." Fenric didn't answer at first. The wind whispered through the trees, shaking frost from the branches. Then he said, "We were betrayed." Her breath hitched. He continued, voice flat. "A treaty was broken. An alliance shattered. We were ambushed on our way to the winter summit. Poisoned first. Then hunted. They drove us north into the storm." "Who?" He didn't answer, but the way his jaw clenched, the way his fist curled, told her more than words. "They wanted you dead," she said quietly. "They still do." The statement sat heavy between them. Mira turned her eyes to the dark sky. "So you're fugitives?" "No," Fenric said. "We are survivors." She didn't know why that moved something in her chest. Perhaps because the word survivor was something she understood. "I was never meant to live this far north," he said, glancing sideways at her. "I used to rule a valley where snow never touched the grass. I never saw snow until I was 13. Mira blinked. "You grew up south of the river?" He nodded. "Then what are you doing here?" she asked, brow furrowed. "This is exile country. Only rogues or outcasts live this far up the ridge." Fenric looked at her then, long and hard, like he saw through her skin into the bones of who she was. "Maybe I belong here now," he said. The word struck something in her she hadn't known was waiting. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The wind died. The trees stood still. And Mira realized with a pang that this man, this stranger, felt more familiar to her in 4 days than her own pack had in 20 years. "I think the storm brought you here for a reason," she whispered. Fenric's expression changed, just a flicker, but it was enough to make her pulse jump. He stepped closer, not touching her, not even quite crowding her space. But she felt him, his power, his presence, and something else, something not dangerous, but ancient, like a thread had snapped into place between them, and the storm was listening. "Do you know what you are, Mira?" he asked suddenly. She blinked. "I'm an Omega." His gaze deepened. "No, that's what they told you." She frowned. "It's what I am. I don't have strength like you. I don't command wolves. I barely shift." "You healed 33 wolves in a single night," Fenric said, voice low. "Without a pack, without magic. You held us together with nothing but will." She looked away, heart thudding. I'm not special. You are to me. The words landed like thunder. Myra's head snapped up, but Fenric had already turned away, striding back toward the cottage. The door closed behind him with a soft click, and she was left standing in the snow, breath caught between disbelief and something that felt dangerously close to hope. She had no way of knowing that inside. Fenric had stopped just beyond the door and leaned against the wall, eyes closed tight, because he had heard it now too. That strange, undeniable echo that lived in the bones of wolves when they met their fated mate. And the bond was stirring, whether they were ready or not. The bond awakened at dawn. Mira felt it before she understood it. Before she even opened her eyes, a low hum beneath her skin, like the echo of a heartbeat that wasn't hers alone. Warm, steady, protective, close. The word brushed the edges of her mind, not spoken, not forced, simply there. She gasped and sat upright, clutching the furs around her shoulders. The cottage was quiet, but not empty. Every wolf inside had stilled, alert in a way that made the air feel charged. Some were already awake, watching her with new awareness. Not suspicion, recognition. Her breath came shallow. "What's happening?" she whispered, unsure who she was speaking to. The door creaked open. Fenric stepped inside, already dressed, his presence filling the room like a storm given shape. His injuries were nearly healed now. Only faint traces of bandages remained, and his movements were once again fluid, controlled, powerful. His eyes met hers, and the bond snapped fully into place. Mira cried out, not in pain, but in shock, as the world tilted. Images flooded her senses. Towering halls of stone and fire, banners marked with a claw crown in silver, wolves kneeling in unison beneath a blood-red moon, battles, oaths, betrayal, a throne, and Fenric, standing alone before it, blood on his hands and grief in his eyes. She swayed, and instantly he was there, catching her before she fell. His hands were warm, solid, real. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this," he said quietly. "I hoped the bond would wait." "You," her voice shook, "you're not just an alpha." "No." The word was heavy, final. The wolves around them dropped to their knees, human and wolf alike, heads bowed, chests thumping in salute. Mira stared, heart hammering. "Fenric, were you?" He exhaled slowly. Then, with deliberate care, he lowered himself to one knee in front of her. "I am the Alpha King of the Northern clans," he said. "Or I was, until my council turned on me and tried to erase my bloodline in the storm." The room spun. "A king," she whispered. "Yes." His gaze never left hers. "And you, whether you wish it or not, are my fated mate." Silence crashed down. Mira pulled free of his grasp and staggered back a step. "No, that's not possible. I'm an Omega. I don't even have a pack. I don't belong in your world." Fenric rose slowly, not approaching her. "You saved my people when my crown could not. You led without commanding. You protected without demanding loyalty." Her hands trembled. "That doesn't make me a queen." "No," he said softly. "It makes you something rarer." Before she could respond, a sharp howl split the air outside, ragged, hostile. The wolves surged at her feet instantly. Fenric turned, every inch of him radiating lethal calm. "They've found us." Fear shot through Mira. "Who?" "The ones who betrayed me." The cottage shook as a blast of power struck its outer walls. Snow exploded inward through the cracks. Dark figures moved between the trees. Wolves twisted by corruption, eyes glowing sickly green. "They want you dead," Mira breathed. Fenric shook his head. "They want you." The truth slammed into her. The bond flared, hot, brilliant, and something inside her answered. Mira stepped forward before she could think. The wolves parted instinctively, forming a circle around her. She raised her hands, palms open, heart pounding. "I won't run," she said. Fenric spun toward her. "Mira." "They came for me," she continued, voice steady now. "And I won't let them take what isn't theirs." The air thickened. Power surged through her veins, not wild, not violent, but commanding. The storm outside responded, wind howling louder. snow swirling like a living thing. Fenric stared at her, all breaking through his composure. "You're not an Omega," he whispered. Mira lifted her chin. "No, I never was." The door burst open, and the storm obeyed her. Snow and wind slammed into the attackers, knocking them flat, freezing limbs, stealing breath. Wolves howled in terror as the blizzard turned against them, unyielding, merciless. When it was over, silence fell. The forest stood untouched. The enemies lay defeated, frozen, scattered, broken. Mira swayed, drained, and Fenric caught her, pulling her into his arms. "You are the heart of the pack," he said, voice thick with emotion. "The storm answers you. The wolves answer you. I answer you." She looked up at him, tears streaking her cheeks. "I never wanted power." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Neither did I. That's why it chose us." Behind them, the 33 wolves knelt once more, not in obedience, but in devotion. Mira understood then. She hadn't just saved them from the blizzard. She had been forged by it. And as she stood beside Fenric, Alpha King reborn, crown reclaimed not by conquest but by loyalty, she finally claimed the truth she had been denied all her life. She was not an outcast, not an Omega. She was the queen of Winter's heart. And this was only the beginning.